Welcome back to another episode of the Nursing Now podcast. I'm your host, Janelle McSwiggan, and I am here with a dear friend, Lori Schellenberg. Lori, thank you so much for joining me today.
Oh, thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So, Lori is a retired nurse that unretired and is having a second wind in life. So, this is super exciting. Lori, can you tell me more about what you do?
Sure. I pivoted once I retired and unretired to figure out I still needed to find my purpose. I needed a mission. And reaching out to friends in the HR world, I was told one of my friends said you really would be an amazing patient advocate. Have you ever heard of that? And I'm like, no, except for in the hospital, but no, not really. And they were telling, she said, there's a such thing as an independent patient advocate, and you can start your own business. And so I learned everything I could and started my own business. And it was more than that too. I think, you and I, in fact, you're part of my next adventure. But when I sat down to really think about my second career, that's what they call retirement now. I've been doing a lot of reading about retirement, and really, this is kind of my second career. And when I sat down and started thinking about what do I really want to do with my life? Like, I can do anything I want to do. And I'm like, I really want to continue to advocate for patients and their families. But not only that, I want to advocate for the nurses that serve those patients and families. So, the last 2 years, I've been focusing on growing my business of nurse patient advocacy work. I specifically have started navigating. You don't have to be a nurse to be a patient advocate, an independent patient advocate, but there are a lot of us in the healthcare field that are going into this because it just makes sense. So for the past 2 years, I've been steadily growing, hiring nurses and training them to pivot to become nurse advocates in Florida and up in Maryland because I'm from Maryland and that's where I know a lot of nurses. So it just made sense. And my kids live there and my grandkids. So it gives me an excuse to travel up and down the coast. So that is really where I'm starting right now. And Janelle, you've been great at supporting me in this. In fact, she was the first one. So I'm developing the second part of my mission is to advocate for the nurses that serve our patients and their families. So now I'm working and developing a training platform off my website. It's called Empowering Nurses, and it's a website where I reach out to seasoned nurses, experienced nurses that have pivoted away from the bedside in very unique ways, as Janelle has. And I've offered them an opportunity to develop a course and tell their story and talk about how they did it, how they pivoted, and give them the nuts and bolts of how to do this. Like, not CEU courses, not 4 semesters of courses that you have to take. Because remember, the nurses that are burned out and wanting to pivot away from the bedside, they are young, busy, shift work, and they don't have time to really research and look. They're unhappy, but they don't know what to do. So this is an opportunity for me to pay it and mentor nurses, and both the young nurses and the older nurses, because by developing these courses, these experienced nurses, I offer them an opportunity to earn some passive income. So once their course is up on my platform, they get 30% each time a student clicks on their course, and goes right into their bank account. So I'm trying to think of people my age or a little younger that are looking on the other side, like we've done all that and now. So I'm trying to help them. I'm trying to help those nurses that want to pivot, and I'm trying to develop this platform into a one-stop kind of place, because there's Indeed out there, there's LinkedIn out there. There's a lot of places nurses can go, job boards out there. but there's not one there's health nurse coaches out there that do an amazing job. Helping nurses to explore, um, where they're at in their life.
I can hear the passion in your voice. I'm so excited to be a part of your mission and to grow as an entrepreneur next to you. I have been an entrepreneur for a little bit longer than you, but I still face hurdles all the time that I'm like, I don't know what to do here. Or even to hear another entrepreneur be like, I don't know anything about a website. I had to figure it out. And for me to be like, yeah, I've been there. I totally remember it. And it wasn't like, a decade ago. Like I remember so struggling with my website and just how to get started as an entrepreneur. I also love the fact that you were a little bit lost for a minute in retirement and you were searching for your purpose. I think that nurses love having a purpose. I think a lot of us find our purpose with helping people at the bedside. So when we take that ability to touch our patients away, a lot of us feel kind of anxious and unsure of what we're doing in our life's path. I get that I get that from a lot of people that are transitioning to medical writing. They question, are they even a nurse? Everything like that. But nursing comes in so many different facets. And hearing you talk about so eloquently about how you want to support our community, support nurses that are burnt out by helping them produce a passive income. It's so clear to me that you're still a nurse in retirement, not in retirement, if you're touching a patient, if you're not touching a patient. The nursing like vibe is just so deep, which is why I love having this podcast because I love when it shines through in whatever my guests are talking about. And we'll have all of your resources in our show notes. You can find me on Lori's wonderful platform. Like I said, I was very excited to be a part of it. I have a course on there in medical writing, and I also do coaching on there as well. And Lori is really gathering a plethora of top-notch talent around her. We've talked about some of the people that she's getting before, so definitely keep an eye on that space if you're interested in transitioning away from the bedside, or you just want to kind of taper down and maybe explore something new. So Lori, thank you so much for really letting your passion shine right there. That was a long intro, but it was a very lovely intro.
Oh,
We talked a little bit about patient advocacy right there. You have a course on it, but we haven't really defined what the formal role of patient advocacy is. Can you tell us what it is, what a typical day might look like, and maybe some of the typical tasks someone might expect if they enter into this role?
yeah. So it's so varied, because no 2 days are alike, and especially for somebody like me that's doing patient advocacy and nurse advocacy and trying to put it all together in one day and do that every day. But the patient advocacy point, really what defines us as patient advocates is, I can tell you that we help patients and families navigate the healthcare system. And that looks very different depending on what your prior nursing experiences were. There's some of us that they're oncology nurses, so they're in that realm. And so those are the clients that they typically help. Although sometimes the oncology advocate will call me because they don't want to do the transitions in care that I do, or the medical management in the hospital, or placement of a patient. They're specific in their little niche, and so we help each other out a lot in that way. We refer out to others. So that's been a wonderful thing too. I have another patient advocate. We do the same exact thing in the area, but we help each other. We cover for each other and we help each other. So it's a pretty cool place to be. And but the one thing that really defines us as patient advocates is that we are more, our gear is our focus is to provide emotional support to the family and to the patient through the work that we do. Because the driver that drives the family to refer to us is their emotional unrest. They're feeling afraid, they're feeling frustrated, they're feeling guilty maybe because they have a family member at home and they're too busy and they can't care for them. So they're looking for ways to find um, um, other services. They're exhausted. Maybe they've been doing it all on their own, and they finally realize I need an advocate to help me help my mom. What other things does she need? We attend doctor's appointments with patients, um, because a lot of times people need another set of ears, because even I sometimes miss things if it's just me, you need somebody there to advocate for you, to speak up for you. And that comes in all ages. I have one client that's 25 years old, and he has a lot of healthcare issues, and he's an adult. But he has a lot of trouble navigating the healthcare system and understanding, especially in the doctors, how to express himself and what he needs. And so I help him. So no 2 days look alike, but that is the main thing, that whenever I get a referral in, I'm listening to it's usually a family member that calls us, and I'm listening with two sets of ears, really. One side of me is listening to the clinical side that's going on, and what I need to do, and what questions I need to find out. How do I need to dig into this case? The other side of me, my other ear, is listening to what that patient is in the family, that what they're feeling, what they're going through, because I'm going to reinforce relieving that stress, because that's going to meet the goals of what that family member really needed. So it's unique. It's different than just being a nurse, where you have tasks to complete, you've got goals to meet, but they're based on, a clinical set of, referring to a case manager in the hospital. Okay, you're a staff nurse, so you hand that off to the discharge planner, you do your tasks, they hand them off to here, discharge planner hands them off to the home health. But what happens, and why families get so frustrated and worried, and is because they don't have somebody to help with that continuity of care. We're all the services are pigeonholed. We have the services that really, it's how do you tap into those, and how are you assured that you're going to get those services? I can give you a big example, and that is at discharge. What happens, like a lot of times, I even will follow a nurse from the ICU, because I get a patient that is a family member. They're very, very sick, and they're afraid, and they're not getting answers from the hospital. So I may get involved at the front end and walk with them onto the unit when they down step. I'll meet up with the case manager. I'll help them with discharge planning. I'll get the names and the contact information. And then I will be holding the hand with the family and the patient when they get home. Okay, how's it working? Well, they've realized that they probably need a little bit more caregivers in the home than they thought they were going to need. And yes, it'd probably be good for you to go to the doctor's appointment and schedule them for us. We're just feeling very overwhelmed. Things that home health doesn't do, but also a lot of times patients are discharged from the hospital. They're waiting for services and nobody calls them. So I am that quarterback. I always say I'm like the quarterback, because they're going to call me, I'm going to call the next play, right? And I just love it. It takes a nurse that's been around a while, and had different experiences. Case managers make great nurse liaison or nurse patient advocates, because they do a lot of coordination. But it takes also a certain heart, I think, to be a patient advocate, because you really have to keep foremost in the front the emotions and the feelings and what the family and the patient are going through. And so you get very close. It's different than a nursing role in a hospital. And that's why I want to encourage other nurses, to get the word out about patient advocacy, because there's Greater National Advocates is a great resource. AFA, the Alliance of Professional Health Advocates. I have a preceptorship on that. I worked with them directly when I first started doing this. There's NAHAC, National Association of Health and oh, I forget what it stands. NAHAC is the, and so there are several professional organizations out there, and we need nurses, and we need nurses to help publicize to healthcare consumers that we're out there and available. And most of us like have websites, so you can Google us and find us. That's how most of mine come, and word of mouth. I get a lot of referrals by word of mouth. So in a nutshell, that's kind of understanding what we do.
Yeah, fabulous. I can definitely picture how that can be so comforting when someone is feeling so alone and confused in the hospital and they're just discharged. And it's such a juxtaposition from being like so almost like suffocatingly taken care of in a hospital where everyone's
Yeah.
watching over you, and then it's just like nothing and it's silent. And you have to manage your care, but you're not feeling 100%, especially because you're in the hospital. So patient advocacy sounds like a great bridge to that. I do have a question. I know case management does do a lot of referral as well. What is the difference between patient advocacy and case management?
So case management is hired by the hospital. So we are hired, we're concierge service. So we don't have to get caught up in all of the regulations and all of insurance and all of that. I mean, we definitely need to understand insurance because in order to advocate in the most cost-effective way for our clients, it would be wise for us to get DME through through their insurance or what have you. But that would be, I would tell you that that's the main, they call that the allegiance factor. And that's what's so important for people to remember and understand what makes us different. And it's because our allegiance is strictly to the patient and their family. And that goes along with the emotional connection that we have with them. Whereas a patient advocate at the hospital, they'll help you. There's, to a certain, they'll listen. But at the end of the day, your allegiance is to whoever pays you. And so that kind of gets rid of all that muddiness of where your allegiance lies, because that can be blurry sometimes. In case management, I did workers' comp for 20 years, and I worked for a case management company who was paid by a workers' comp insurance company, and I was referred to by the insurance companies to be the patient advocate or the patient the workers' comp case manager to help manage their care if they've been injured on the job. But it takes a strong focus to remember what your mission is and to stay within your lane when you're working with many different people and many different players. Whereas with me, my one player is my family, and so that's the main thing. And I'm glad you brought that up because that is important to know.
Fascinating. Thank you so much for explaining that. That makes total sense.
Yeah.
So, is it fair to say that I'd like to try and categorize what type of nurses might be best suited for which type of role? So, maybe a nurse that always kind of was a little bit interested in mental health or just really wanted to spend more time with the family and is kind of really good at multiple different roles, a little bit type A, maybe to be able to handle all of these things. And also, I don't want to use the word advocacy because that's in the title, but to be able to, I guess, like, um,
Support.
yes, thank you, support and like stand their ground, I guess, if the patient like needs definitive support in that way. Are there any other characteristics that I'm missing that a nurse might be called to for this position?
So besides someone with a mental health background
Yeah, any
and
of that.
case management or a type of person, I think you have to be confident in, and most nurses know, a good nurse knows when she needs to stand her ground, a hospital nurse or any in any, home health. Home health is a good place to come from to become a patient advocate too, because you do need to have to understand insurance. we often deal with home health as part of advocacy because it's such a, if you're doing we all have different services, but I do transitions in care a lot. And so I'm always dealing with some kind of setting up kind of services in the home. And so home health, they see a lot. They have more intimate interaction like I do. And so they have that mentality. What I like about being an advocate as opposed to a home health, hospice is the same way. If you're a hospice nurse, you would make a great patient advocate too, because you're dealing with families and their loved one that's passing away, and um, having that understanding how to make work what you need to make it better for their patient. So sometimes you're thinking outside of the box. Sometimes you're thinking about doing things not in the most, but it works. I found so many things like that where I've actually, thought about things and made things go a different way, but it worked. Problem solving is huge because you're trying to problem solve for the family. So I hope that answered your questions. I don't know if it was if you were talking about the type of nurse or the type of job they had.
Either way is great. I think it just helps when another nurse listening kind of sees their own self or doesn't see their self in a position so they can
Yeah,
think, oh, that might be me, or maybe that's not the best fit for me. So
yeah.
interesting that you said home health. I could definitely see that too thriving in this. So it sounds like you set up a lot of services. Do you have relationships with different companies that you pull on, or is it really dependent on insurance? I'm sure insurance does play a role, but how do you know what to do
How
in
to
those situations? Yeah.
So I do a lot of networking with other healthcare professionals for resources and collaboration. This whole last year, in my campaign was about collaborating with other healthcare resources because I can't do, it takes a village. That's the other thing I always say is I cannot do my job alone because really I am like the quarterback, but I have to bring resources in to make to whether it's a dementia patient that I'm taking care of and I need to get services in the home and maybe help them find an adult daycare program. So I'm looking at what's available in the area, whether it's I need to get support groups or home health or DME or private duty nurses in there, or what PT, who's good PTs that takes this insurance, or who. So, and if I don't know, I just, it's always been my way to be a problem solver. So if I get somebody that I don't know, which it happens a lot, you just start to problem solve. I call other nurses, I call other people I know and say, do you know, Baba, this is my problem. And that's part of the wonderful world of nursing and healthcare too. Um, I I say, that thing where everybody says nurses eat their young. So I never felt that. And I think, and because I've always loved to mentor other nurses all through my career, I'd find these cool little niche jobs and I'd just like say, hey, come check this job out. This is like really cool. It's something unique. Let's go check out that. But I just have never felt, I've always pivoted in my career to what I needed to do for my husband or whatever. So I think that knowing that there's a world of people like me and nurses and healthcare professionals that I'm not afraid to reach out and ask for help or give help. If anybody calls me with a question, what do you think? I'm like, oh, let's talk about it. Let's figure it out. And so that's what I just love being a patient advocate. It's the best role for me. The hardest part was starting the business.
Well, it's great to connect with another nurse that is pushing back on the nurses eat their young mentality. I haven't felt a ton of that mentality, but I have spoken to other nurses that have felt that. And I actually know someone that let her license lapse because of nurse bullying. And that just
Gosh, I
absolutely
wish I would have known.
I know. It was a couple of jobs ago and it just absolutely scarred her. And she's actually the one that taught me that phrase because I had never even learned that phrase before. I was working in a school as a nurse and she was a teacher's aide that had let her license lapse and she was a nurse. And just the fact that another nurse or group of nurses or, it's been a bit can push another nurse out of an industry when we need nurses so much is just so absolutely heartbreaking. She was a little bit older than me, probably by a decade. So I'm hoping and praying that that's like an outdated frame of mind because I haven't felt that viciousness from our community, but I have heard stories from other people. So I definitely do my part to push back on that and be friendly and be nice. And even on days when I don't feel like being sunshine, I still make sure that my interactions with people online are happy because I do not know what that nurse is going through on that day. So I think that just pushing back on that is really nice to see in another nurse. And I definitely see that in you too, Lori. So thank you for being a part of that change.
You're welcome.
Um, so are does patient advocacy, do they have a certification? I know some niches of nursing have certifications and some of them hold more weight than others. Medical writing has a certification, but it's really not that important. I haven't been certified and it really doesn't hold that much weight. Is there certification for your niche?
There is. You do not have to be a healthcare provider. You have to just take a test and you can have been a care provider for 30 years for your grandma, and if you've learned how to be a caregiver, and then you can sit for this test, and if you pass it, then you become board certified. I am not certified either, because I think as an RN that supersedes that weight of anybody can take that course. And I don't mean that in any disrespect at all. For we need everybody that can help advocate for patients. So I'm not, no disrespect, but for me, that I'm like you, I haven't felt a need to be certified, but I probably will eventually. But it hasn't hindered my ability to start in patient advocacy work. I think that's the main thing that I want to get people to know, is that don't let not being certified stop you, because you can, be a patient advocate without it, and especially if you're a nurse or a healthcare provider.
I know exactly what you mean too about not diminishing anyone else's role as a patient advocate. That's not a nurse or anything like that. Everyone's a team player here,
Yeah.
but just that certifications don't hold the same weight in other specialties. So just I was just curious about that
Yeah, that
because
was that was a very good question. And people ask me that when they go to take my course, Lori, do I need to get certified? And so I try to be very um, transparent about that.
yeah, the certifications are wild. Like I think for case management, they want you to work for like 3 years as a case manager before you're certified, but then so many jobs want you to be certified to apply. So it's like it's so interesting how it varies by like niche for
It
all the people I'm talking to.
Yeah, I mean, we all, I think a certification lets people know that you meet certain criteria, you understand about standards and care, and you meet certain criteria. And I think that is important for where some of the people are coming from to become patient advocates. So, yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, it does set a very clear standard.
Mhm.
Lori, do you have any parting words for any of our listeners today on patient advocacy, being an entrepreneur, or any other shining lights of wisdom that you'd like to share?
Yes, first of all, once a nurse, always a nurse. I think that's the first thing. The second thing is, here's your challenge to change. If you're not happy in nursing right now, you want to get away from the bedside. I think that this is a wonderful way to continue to give back and to help our healthcare system to continue to be able to serve our patients by showing that there's different ways that we can do that. And I think the last thing is retirement doesn't mean retirement. It just means a second career.
I love all of those, especially once a nurse, always a nurse. I think that I have a renown, like a new pride in being a nurse, especially after joining LinkedIn, starting my business and connecting with other nurses. I think for a while I was working and just, I guess, feeling a little bit down that I wasn't higher up in the medical hierarchy, not a doctor, not a prescriber, anything like that. It was just kind of floating. But the sense of community I have with the other nurses that I've been meeting online and having these really beautiful conversations has just absolutely blown me away. And I can't believe I ever even thought like that because I am so proud to be a nurse in this community of strong, amazing people changing the world one day at a time. At the bedside, away from the bedside, regardless of their ability to prescribe, like that's is so
It's so
like
not.
minimal. Yeah, it doesn't even matter. So, yeah, once a nurse, always a nurse, and like nurse pride for that for sure.
Yes.
So thank you for bringing that up again.
And it's funny if I can tell you one more thing, the nurse practitioners, we have physicians all coming and wanting to learn about patient advocacy, independent patient advocacy work. So does that tell you?
Yes, yes. I'm seeing the same thing with writing as well. It's not
Yeah.
just nursing, it's, a bunch of different medical titles as well, which is just so absolutely fascinating to me too. It is such an interesting time to inhabit this earth. Like I'm constantly being blown away by what's happening around me.
And pulling us in so many ways, right?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
All right, Lori Schellenberg, thank you so much. This was incredibly insightful. I know everyone listening loved all of your moments of sharing your journey to entrepreneur, what you're doing for the nursing community, and how they can better themselves. I'm going to edit that because I don't want to say better themselves because they're not bad.
Yeah.
How they can pivot to become a different type of nurse if they choose that path. So, thank you so much again for sharing your story.
You're welcome.
All right, this has been your Nursing Minute.